Welcome to day 212 on the trail. We have three readings for today from 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 1 through 4:34, 2 Chronicles chapter 1 verse 1 through 2:18, and 4 Maccabees chapter 6 verses 1 through 35. In our reading from 1 Kings and 2 Chronicles today, we find Solomon's request for wisdom, which God honors, and a description of the expansiveness of Solomon's empire. Reading from 1 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 20. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea. They ate and drank and were happy. Solomon was sovereign over all the kingdoms, from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, even to the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of choice flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 fat oxen, and 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl. For he had dominion over all the region west of the Euphrates, from Tiphsah to Gaza, over all the kings west of the Euphrates, and he had peace on all sides. Over the years, there has been no small debate over the authenticity of the claims regarding the size of Solomon's empire. Given the lack of sufficient archaeological, epigraphic, and literary evidence to confirm or reject the biblical picture of an expansive Solomonic empire, scholarship is resigned to speculate about the size of Solomon's kingdom, based upon a virtually silent material record outside of the biblical account. According to Dr. Max Miller, with whom I had the pleasure of traveling through Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Israel, the debate over the magnificence of Solomon's empire is ultimately reduced to an examination of the evidence, or lack thereof, against a scale from possibility to plausibility. Placement on this sliding scale is far from an objective exercise, however. On one side of the argument, the virtually silent material record would be expected due to a dark age experienced by the surrounding nations in the 10th century BC. That is, since Egypt, Babylon, and the neighboring empires were weak and inconsequential at the time, the Israelite monarchy was provided with an opportunity for development and growth. On the other side of the spectrum, however, the lack of evidence about Solomon's kingdom outside of the biblical account raises serious doubts regarding the grandeur of his kingdom. Therefore, some ask, how could such a magnificent and expansive empire leave not even a single piece of solid evidence to confirm its existence? As a result, scholars attempt to string together a series of plausible conditions to form or support their argument. Dr. Miller, for example, is willing to acknowledge a Solomonic golden age for Israel, yet maybe not to the extent described in the Hebrew Bible. However, arguing for the veracity of the account in the Hebrew Bible, Dr. Alan Millard from the University of Liverpool points out that wherever the 1st and 2nd Kings account can be checked against adequate records from other documents, it can be seen to be a reliable record, keeping its own purpose and view in mind. I decided to introduce this debate today to give you a taste of the debates and scholarship that often surround passages from the Hebrew Bible. With most of the Middle East unexplored by archaeologists, and the damage done to the historical data due to wars and conflicts that have continually ravaged this area of the world, finding concrete verification of stories that are over several millennia old is nearly impossible. The debate over Solomon's kingdom is not simply a discussion over a famous ruler in Palestine who existed in the 10th century BC. Instead, the relative scarcity of epigraphic and conclusive archaeological evidence to authenticate or falsify the biblical record provides a microcosm for larger issues alive in historical reconstruction and textual criticism. In the final analysis, history stands in the midst of some of the most foundational issues currently being faced in other scientific disciplines. Models of analysis and foundational presuppositions are continually being challenged. And regardless of the sincerity of any quest for objectivity, either in the reconstruction of history or in its analysis of the present, we must also remember that there's often far more that we do not know. Therefore, humility and a willingness to learn is our best approach. Now, finally, I would like to briefly comment on the story of Solomon's wisdom in 1 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 16. Later, two women who were prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. Then on the third day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth. We were together. There was no one else with us in the house. Only the two of us were in the house. Then this woman's son died in the night, because she lay on him. She got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while your servant slept. She laid him at her breast and laid her dead son at my breast. When I rose in the morning to nurse my son, I saw that he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, clearly it was not the son I had borne. But the other woman said, 'No, the living son is mine. The dead son is yours.' The first said, 'No, the dead son is yours. The living son is mine.' So they argued before the king." Right from the beginning of the story, we are given an often overlooked detail. The two mothers in the story are described as prostitutes. This is central to the example of Solomon's wisdom because it demonstrates how Solomon, in his wisdom, would hear the case of even the lowliest of his subjects. Also, this story is not a moral commentary on the practice of prostitution in this period of Israelite history, nor does it address the horrific behavior of this woman who stole her friend's baby and then lied about it to the king. Also, we do not hear any criticism for the woman who'd rather see a living child cut in two rather than allow the true mother to have the baby. While all of these are reprehensible acts, they are also functioning here as background to the story's central theme, Solomon's wisdom. In the end, Solomon believes that the true mother will be willing to lose her own child in order to let the child live. And he is correct. May we too endeavor to seek the best for our children, even when it causes us pain. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.